Hi Essex, it's Miss Ahad here with your reading lesson. In order to be successful in today's lesson, you will need a copy of the text and your activity. So please get those items if you haven't done so already. I'm now going to share my screen with you so we can go through our vocabulary together. As you know, the text we're studying this week in reading is The Explorer. We're going to delve into our vocabulary. I'm going to have my turn, and then when I do this, that means it's an indication for you to have yours. So, grimace. And this is a facial expression which is ugly, which is often ugly, and it indicates pain or disapproval. Grimace. Our next word is swerved, and this is a verb, and it usually means turn aside abruptly in movement or direction. Swerved. So you could say here in a sentence, the car swerved this white vehicle so that they didn't have a car accident. Our next word is deserted. And this means a property that is untenanted without inhabitants, so nobody is living there. Next word is lurched, lurched. And this means swaying abruptly. So you could say the train lurched forwards and the passengers fell to one side. Our next word is an adjective, and that is to describe something small. The word is infinitesimal. Infinitesimal. Then have another verb, and that's squinted. And to squint is looking like this, and it means to look with your eyes partly closed, so you might be struggling to see something, which is why you're squinting. Squinted. Lastly, we have frown, and this is to look displeased or to have an angry look. And this is Miss Ahad's frown. You can see my eyebrows are frowning. Frown. We're now going to read the text together. So I'd like you to get hold of your text, whether that be online or printed out, and follow the text with me. So please pause the video and do that. Flight. Like a man-made magic wish, the aeroplane began to rise. The boy, sitting in the cockpit, which is an area of the plane that's at the front of the plane, usually where the pilot's sitting, gripped his seat and held his breath as the plane climbed into the arms of the sky. Fred's jaw was set with concentration and his fingers twitched, following the movements of the pilot beside him. Joystick, throttle. A joystick, also known as a control column, controls the aircraft. It's almost like a manual gear stick. The aeroplane vibrated as it flew faster into the setting sun, following the swerve of the Amazon River below them. Fred could see the reflection of the six-seater plane, a spot of black on the vast sweep of blue, as it spread towards Manaus, the city on the water. He brushed his hair out of his eyes and pressed his forehead against the window. Behind Fred sat a girl and her little brother. They had the same slanted eyebrows and the same brown skin, the same long eyelashes. The girl had been shy, hugging her parents until the last possible moment at the airfield. Now she was staring down at the water, singing under her breath, her brother trying to eat a seatbelt. In the next row on her own sat a pale girl with blonde hair down to her waist. Her blouse had a neck ruffle that came up to her chin, and she kept tugging it down and grimacing. Well, grimacing is one of my key words for my vocabulary, and that means to make a facial expression which is disapproving of something or someone showing discomfort or pain. She was determinedly not looking out of the window. The airfield they had just left had been dusty and almost deserted, just a strip of tarmac under the ferocious Brazilian sun. Fred's cousin had insisted that he wear his school uniform and cricket jumper, and now, inside the hot, airless cabin, he felt like he was being gently cooked inside his own skin. The engine gave a whine, suggesting to me the engine's quite old, and the pilot frowned and tapped his joystick. He was old and soldery, with brisk nostril hair and a grey wax moustache, which seemed to reject the usual laws of gravity. He touched the throttle and the plane soared upwards, higher into the clouds. It was almost dark when Fred began to worry. The pilot began to belch, first quietly, then violently and repeatedly. His hand jerked on the plane, and the plane dipped suddenly to the left. Someone screamed behind Fred. The plane lurched away from the river and over the canopy. The pilot grunted, gasped, and wound back the throttle, slowing the engine. He gave a cough that sounded like a choke. Fred stared at the man. He was turning the same shade of grey as his moustache. "Are you all right, sir?" he asked. "Is there something I can do?" Fighting for breath, the pilot shook his head. He reached over to the control panel and cut the engine. The roar ceased, which means the roar stopped or discontinued. The nose of the plane dipped downwards, the trees rose up. The nose of the plane is usually the tip of the plane, so the front of the plane. What's happening? Asked the blonde girl sharply. What's he doing? Make him stop. The little boy in the back began to shriek, suggesting he may be feeling scared. The pilot grasped Fred's wrist hard for a single moment. Then his head slumped against the dashboard, and the sky, which had seconds before seemed so reliable, gave way. The green dark. This may be suggesting to me the title. The adjectives have been used to describe maybe the Amazon. Let's see. Fred wondered as he ran if he was dead, but he thought death would surely be quieter. The roar of the flames and his own blood vibrated through his hands and feet. The night was black. He tried to heave in breath to shout for help as he ran, but his throat was too dry and ashy to yell. He jabbed his finger into the back of his tongue to summon for spit, again suggesting he's poking his finger into the back of his tongue to almost get saliva so he can talk. Is anybody there? Help! Fire! He shouted. The fire called back in response. A tree behind him sent up a fountain of flames. There was a rumble of thunder. Nothing else replied. A burning branch cracked, spat red, and fell in a cascade of sparks. Fred leapt away, stumbling backwards into the dark and smacking his head against something hard. The branch landed exactly where he'd been standing seconds before. He swallowed the bile that rose in his throat and began to run again, faster and wilder. Something up, smacking at his face, but it was only a raindrop. The rain came suddenly and hard. It turned the soot and sweat on his hands to something like tar, but it began to quench the fire. Maybe suggesting to him began to extinguish, to stop the fire. Fred slowed his run to a jog, then to a stop, gasping, choking. He looked back the way he had come. The little aeroplane was in the trees. It was smoking, sending up clouds of white and grey into the night sky. He stared around, dizzy and desperate, but he couldn't see or hear a single human, only the fern-like plants growing around his ankles and the trees reaching hundreds of feet up into the sky, and the panic dive and shriek of birds. He shook his head hard, trying to banish the shipwreck roar in his ears. The hair on his arms was singed and smelt of eggs, again suggesting to me that something has been burnt. He put his hand to his forehead. His eyebrows had charred, this suggesting to me that there had been a fire, against burning of something, and this in this case is the burning of hairs. He wiped his eyebrow on the sleeve of his shirt. Fred looked down at himself. One leg of his trousers was ripped all the way up to the pocket, but none of his bones felt broken. There was a vicious pain, though, in his back and neck, and it made his arms and legs feel far off and foreign. A voice came suddenly from the dark. Who's there? Get away from us! Fred spun round, his ears still buzzing. He grabbed a rock from the ground and hurled it in the direction of the voice. He ducked behind a tree and crouched on his haunches, poised to jump or run. This again, poised to jump or run, suggesting that his body positioning, he was ready with his body language to jump or run had anything popped up. His heart sounded like a one-man band. He tried not to exhale, suggesting to me that he didn't want to make any noise so no one could see him. The voice said, "For God's sake, don't throw things." Now what I'm going to do is share my screen so you can see the activity under the visualizer. So you should be able to see my activity. As I said earlier, we are looking at word meanings, which means we're looking at meanings of the word in context. So we need to understand it in context with our text, in this case, the Explorer. So it's asking me on page 3, there's a sentence from page 3 and it says, the nose of the plane dipped downwards. So this suggesting to me, whatever the nose of the plane is, wherever it is, it's going downwards. That's the direction it's traveling in. What does the nose of the plane refer to in this sentence? The back of the plane, well, I know it's not the back of the plane. The front of the plane, the side of the plane, the window. Well, Miss Ad's going to go with the front of the plane. And I know this because the nose refers to the front of the plane. It's the tip of the plane. I'd like you to now have a go at word meanings. So please pause the video and try the word meanings and come back once you have written those out. So our next question, we're going to go on to the questions, and Miss A is going to do a few with you. The first question asks us, what similarities do the brother and sister sitting behind Fred have? And I need to turn to page 2. So from my text, I'm just going to get to page 2. So I'm going to read page 2 again. He brushed his hair out of his eyes and pressed his forehead against the window. Behind Fred sat a girl and her little brother. Well, I know this is where I'm going to find my evidence. They have the same slanted eyebrows and the same brown skin, the same long eyelashes. Well, the sentences here suggest there are similarities between Fred, the girl, and her little brother. Well, I need to write down some similarities of the brother and sister sitting behind Fred. So I'm going to go with, they had the same slanted, which means tilted, eyebrows, and the same skin. And then also it states the same long eyelashes. This again suggests that similarities have been portrayed between Fred, his sister, the brother, and his sister. Okay, so another question that we're going to model together is question number 2. And here we need to write down 2 things we are told about the airfield they have just left. And again, that evidence we will find on page 2. So I'm going to continue reading. The girl had been shy, hugging her parents until the last possible moment at the airfield. Now she was staring down at the water, singing under her breath, her brother trying to eat his seatbelt. In the next row, on her own, sat a pale girl with blonde hair down to her waist. Her blouse had a neck ruffle that came up to her chin, and she kept tugging it down and grimacing. She was determinedly not looking out of the window. The airfield they had just left, I know it, I'm going to find some evidence from this paragraph here because it's suggesting to me that it's talking about the airfield they had just left had been dusty and almost deserted. Well, the question asks me to write down 2 things that's similar about, 2 things we are told about the airfield they have just left. So again, I know I need to write down 2 things because the question, it's in bold and it underlines that for me. Okay, so I'm going to write down from the text, I know that the airfield is dusty and it's almost deserted. Remember, deserted is one of our key words, and that means it's left alone. There's no tenants living there. So almost deserted. So here it's suggesting that it's almost untenanted. Nobody is living there. So I'm going to go with dusty, again, capital letters at the start of your sentence. So I've written down my 2 things that we are told about the airfield that they have just left. So it's dusty and deserted. Now, year 6, I'm going to ask you to have a go at the activity. You're going to answer the questions, just like we always do in reading, and then upload them onto Seesaw. I will be updating you with the answers in tomorrow's lesson, so watch out for them. Happy reading. Bye.